Hey, good morning, everyone. Let's try that again. Hey, good morning, everyone. It's so good to be here with you again. If we haven't met, my name is Matthew, and I'm thrilled to be here again to get the guest teach. Give Beth a Sunday to kind of just rest and hang out and be here in church and worship. And so we're going to continue this series today that we started last week. And we're going to talk about what is it that we can begin to do in our life practically? Like, how do the things that we do, like on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, how are they forming us into the kinds of people that we want to become? So something that I've started recently, like a habit, is I've started in the last several months to take really long walks with my dogs. And these are them. These are my favorite creatures on the whole earth, besides my children, of course. And Winnie is the golden retriever, and then Luna is our black lab puppy. I wasn't a very good dog owner in the sense that I didn't give them enough exercise. Like, they're big dogs; they need lots of activity, and I just didn't have the space for it, you know. And so, like, I would walk them a couple times a week, maybe, and we'd play fetch in the backyard. But they were super barky to the neighbor dogs, and I don't know if you have, like, I don't know why dogs bark at other dogs so much, but they really barked a lot. Anyway, I knew it was probably annoying to our neighbors, and I just didn't have the space to care about it. Well, then a number of months ago, we got a text message from our next door neighbor. She texted my wife, Rebecca, and this was an unsolicited message full of helpful advice on how to take care of dogs. And we're not friends with this neighbor, like we hardly talk, but she fosters dogs, so she really cares about dogs. She lives alone. She has a lot of like energy around this, and she was just in a way that was really, I think, trying to be very helpful, say like, I don't think you guys are giving your dogs enough activity. I think that's why they bark so much. Okay, so that kind of unsolicited advice, you know, sort of helpful coaching, it hit me in a way that was grating. It was like annoying but that, I don't know how you would take it. Maybe you're like, thank you so much. I'm always looking for advice. For me, it kind of bothered me a little bit because like I started, you know, like you do all this stuff. You're like, you don't know how busy I am, and I have 4 kids, and you know, you run down your resume on why this doesn't matter. But then it really did. The thing is, it was true. She was telling me something that actually was real. So we started doing it. I started walking the dogs every day, a couple miles in the morning, maybe a couple more at the end of the day, just kind of getting out, unless it's pouring down rain. And at first it's a chore, you know, I don't want to do this every day. But now it's like, then it becomes something that you look forward to. Like now it's just something we do. It's just a part of my life. And when we talk about habits, we're talking about the space between like this initial idea of like, I would like to implement this practice, I'd like to be this kind of person, all the way to like, now it's just what we do. And the space between those 2 points is a big deal, because we all know the energy around that initial burst of, I'm gonna do something different, I'm gonna change something about my life. This is why New Year's resolutions they're so popular, and at the same time, they're so fatally flawed. Like every single year, the statistic I read this week is that 23% of all New Year's resolutions are broken by the end of the first week. So January 8th is already gone, 1 in 4 gone. By the end of January, only 1 in 3 are still going. 64% have gone the way of the dodo. And so we are great at starting things, but finishing them it's hard. All of us at various points in our life make decisions to change something about our life. Maybe it's when the blood work comes back from an annual physical, or it's when the calendar turns over, or it's when we suddenly wake up and realize I only have like 1 more year and then my kid is moving out of the house, or it's when a church does a series on habits. Whatever it is for you that like ends up being the thing that pushes you into some kind of decision-making process, we do know instinctively that the thing that's really gonna make something a habit, the thing that's gonna make it stick, is that hard space between choosing to do it and then actually putting it into practice again and again and again and again. And to do that, it takes grit. It just takes tenacity, it takes endurance. There was a book that came out a number of years ago by Angela Duckworth called Grit. Fantastic book, very timely, very necessary for this season, I think, in our country, our culture. But she says at the beginning, and I could quote so much from this book, but I was going to do one quote. She says, enthusiasm is common, endurance is rare. And I think most of us would agree with that there's a lot of energy around starting things, a lot of energy around quick fixes, a lot of social media and marketing around like 2 weeks to this or 36 hours of this, or if you'll, just do this kind of practice, 15 minutes a day, you'll see these results in 8 days or whatever it is. And the reality is those things don't work. We all know they don't work. It takes that long, steady endurance, that gritty, resolved decision. One of my heroes, I referenced him last week, but a guy named Dallas Willard, he was a professor out at USC, Southern California, philosophy, an incredible man of God. But he wrote a book called Renovation of the Heart, which is this very beefy, beautiful work about how do people actually change. And one of the things that he lays out at the beginning of his book is this model for what is required for change. And he uses the acronym VIM, V-I-M. And he says, we need to have vision, we need to have intention, and we need to have the means. And he sort of uses learning a foreign language as being a model for this. He's like, so if you decide, I want to speak French, like let's say like you watched Amelie on an airplane, or you had a really good baguette, and so you decided, this is gonna be my thing, I'm going to speak French. He said that the problem is that's not gonna be enough, like that initial spark. You need a vision of why you're doing this. Maybe it's a trip. Maybe you're gonna be, in French Canada later next year, or you're gonna be in Paris, or maybe you're dating someone and they speak French and you wanna go to the restaurant and you wanna order something in French and see their eyes light up. You have to have something you're working towards, some vision, some picture that is inspiring you. And then once you have that, like, this is why I want to get there, this is what I'm aiming for, then the second part is intention. This is like the will. This is when we decide that vision is an actual potential future for us. Like, we could get there. We just have to choose to go in that direction. And so this is us just sort of pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, doing the hard work, making the decision again and again. I'm going to become a person who speaks French for whatever reason, because I have this vision in front of me. And then finally, Willard says you need the means. You have to have the action step. You have to have the plan. Some of us have probably had decisions before, like at the beginning of the year, and you say something like, I'm going to read 30 books this year. Fantastic. What's the plan? How is your nightly schedule changing? Where is this slotting into your time? Like, you have to have the means to actually get from where you are to where you want to be. And so you have an alarm go off every day, and Duolingo reminds you, like, it is time to practice French, or you start taking French classes, or you watch lots of French movies, or whatever it is. You have to have the means. So what is, in this series, as we're talking about these habits that hold, what is the vision that Jesus is giving to us? And we looked at this verse last week, but I think this is a picture of what he's offering to us. He says in Matthew 11, come to me, all who are weary and burdened. Anyone? Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke, that is, take my way of life, take my teaching, take my practices upon you. Like, learn from me, for I am humble and gentle of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Like, instead of a frantic, stressed life, a calm, peaceful, grounded, non-anxious, open, patient, gentle life. Like, to be a person who moves through the uncertainties and the storms of life and just embodies a restful presence. That's the vision Jesus is offering to you. And he's like, would you like that? Is that intriguing to you? Is that different than what your normal life feels like? So what are the means? That's the vision. What's the means? Well, the means are, he says, my yoke, take my teaching, learn from me. And I think we can expand it to the scriptures. What is the scriptures calling us to? What are they teaching us? In fact, we're going to look at a text in a couple of minutes that is from a New Testament letter that still comes to us today as like, this is God's best for us. This is him saying, this is how you walk in a way that's going to lead to your flourishing. Another verse that we looked at last week, which we'll return to every week in this series, is from the end of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, where he says, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. And so we started with this idea last week that Jesus is not merely calling you into a set of beliefs. Being a Christian is more than just having a set of ideas that you decide, I'm going to agree that these things are true. But it's actually a way of life. It's a way of moving in the world in the steps of Jesus. It's a way of extending the ministry of what Jesus was like as he walked around Palestine and the Galilee into West Fargo and beyond, so that I'm actually carrying on the work, the practices, the behavior of Jesus in my everyday life. Last week we talked about, to kick off, 2 different practices that I think are really foundational for all these things, which is how are you making sure every day and every week that you are reminding yourself of ultimate reality? Our lives are full of narratives. We have narratives flying at us constantly, all day long, storylines from the things we listen to, and podcasts, and the news that we consume, and our friend groups, all these things. This is what matters. This is what's most important. And last week we talked about, what does it mean to make sure that God is first, in a sense that I'm going to, for just a couple of minutes every day, lift myself up out of the hecticness of life and the urgency of now, and almost, as it were, like suspend myself in a moment of reminding myself of what is most true. That I live in a world in which God is fully present everywhere, that he is my good shepherd, that he's taking care of me, that he has my life in his hands, that I am safe ultimately because my life is in his hands. How are you making sure that that's a daily and then a weekly practice that you're engaging in? And then this week, we're going to talk a bit more specifically about one specific practice that we do as Christians that is incredibly important in who we're becoming, and that is gathering with one another, specifically this kind of gathering. Christian communities in church. I find it helpful to note that from the very beginning of the church, Christians have struggled to prioritize coming to church. And it's for different reasons. Like, I don't think there were a lot of traveling sports leagues that their kids were in the first century. Like, they had other reasons why they were getting pulled in different directions. But it's just kind of helpful to know that from the beginning of the church, people have struggled to prioritize coming together. And that's because we all understand that there's 2 kinds of priorities. There's our stated priorities, the things that we want to be true as the most important thing. And then there's all the other stuff that's just right in front of us. This is the stuff that's just kind of coming at us all the time. And most of us, even though we have this is my priority this year, the reality is what ends up taking the front seat, what usually ends up driving the plot of my life is all the stuff that just comes at me. And this is what John Lennon sang in Beautiful Boy, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans, which I think is actually a really good warning sign. That is true, that is what my life can be. My life can be like this, just constantly pivoting to what's in front of me as opposed to actually living out of my priorities. So in our text today, we're going to look at this little verse from the book of Hebrews. And if you don't know much about the book of Hebrews, that's okay. Most people don't, including biblical scholars. We don't know who wrote it. We don't know who it was written to. We're not exactly sure when it was written, but we know it was early, which is just to say, it's kind of a mystery. Isn't it cool? But we do know this. These were normal Christians, just like you and me, people who were trying to figure this out, how to walk in the way of Jesus. And they needed to hear a word from this guy to encourage them to prioritize the right things. And so this is what he wrote. He says, let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day approaching. Not giving up meeting as some are in the habit, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day approaching. Now that phrase, the day approaching, is probably confusing to some people. And that's a reference to this idea, especially in the first century, that any day now Jesus is going to come back. And the church still believes any day now Jesus could come back. But in the first century, they literally thought it was going to happen in their lifetimes. They were waiting it's surely by now, so they had this sense of urgency, which I think is important to note. Jesus calls us to a similar posture of expectation, that God's moving, that something's happening around us. So in other words, live as though you're always right on the cusp of God doing something big in your midst. And therefore, don't give up meeting with one another. Get together, stay connected to one another. Now, you may remember this because I've mentioned this in previous sermons, but I was a pastor for 17 years. And now I have a corporate job and it's totally different. But I was a pastor for 17 years. And when you're a pastor, let me just tell you, when you work at a church, you don't understand why people don't go to church. You don't understand it. You're Because you like work all week long. This isn't like, I'm not trying to guilt anyone. I'm just telling you work all week long and you're like, we try to make it really good and the band's good and the coffee's hot, and the talks are somewhat relevant, hopefully. Like, we're doing our best. Why do people not come to church? Why do they come like once every 3 or 4 Sundays? Like, you just don't get it. It doesn't connect with you. Because it's a work day and you work really hard and you want it to be nice and people come and every time they come, they're like, I'm so glad I was here. It's like, yeah, well, come back. So that's how you think about it as a pastor. Okay, and then after 17 years of being a pastor, I stopped being a pastor. And I realized that Sunday is a weekend day. I don't know if you guys know this, but Sunday holds out to you the same promises of every Saturday morning, except probably with fewer birthday parties and Little League games and stuff cluttering it up. It's just a free day for sweatpants and second cups of coffee and long walks in the park and sleeping in and reading a book. And I was like, oh, this is why people don't go to church. Because this is awesome. Because having a day of rest is really great. Okay, so I say all that to just acknowledge from the beginning, first of all, a guy on a stage at a church with a microphone telling people why they should come to church is such a cliche. Please forgive me. Beth flew me all the way from Atlanta just so I would be the one to give you that message. No, I'm kidding. But seriously, like, there is a bit of a cliche in this. And I know now more than ever how hard it is to get your kids through those doors, to get them up one more morning of the week and get them dressed and out the door, or for you to decide like, I'm gonna make this a priority, or like how hard it is just to like, say no to something that sounds more fun, especially when it's like a beautiful day and the lake is calling, or it's like a really snowy day and the fireplace is calling, to be like, no, I'm gonna go anyway. Like sometimes it's hard, like I don't wanna put on pants today, and I wanna have a day that's relaxing. And as like amazing as long lingering, slow mornings and all those things and how restorative they are and how necessary they are for our life, I'm gonna camp here for a minute because I think it's really, really, really important to come to church. Because I think something happens here that can't be replicated elsewhere. There's something that's like, and this is like, I hesitate a little bit to use this word, but I like it. It's almost magical what happens. Like there's something that won't happen other places that does happen here. We spend so much of our lives disconnected from one another, so much of our life detached, existing only through digital media. A bunch of us since 2020, we have jobs now where most of our jobs are just Zoom meetings. That's my life. Like I spend half my week looking at people all over the country in a meeting room. And we are increasingly tribal as a people, tending to only really associate with people who really agree with us about politics or economics or parenting styles or whatever it is. And so when you finally get a room full of people that are coming from all different walks of life and all different educational backgrounds and all different perspectives on a whole wide array of things, and we all pile in next to one another, and we all look in the same direction and think about the same things and sing together. We don't sing very well in America, like lots of other cultures sing, like most other cultures sing. They sing at their sporting events, they sing all the time. We sing like on birthdays. That's it, we sing on birthdays. So when we come together and we sing together and we think about something together and we drink coffee with one another, it's like it just sticks with you. It stays with you. You carry it out of here. It's important. It's important for who we're becoming. It's important for the future version of myself. Probably one of the most influential Christian thinkers of the last 100 years is C.S. Lewis, and probably many of you have heard of him. He's most famously known for writing the Chronicles of Narnia. And yet he wrote a lot of other books that I think are even better. But what you may not know about Lewis is that he was an atheist for 40 years. And and not just like an atheist, like not like I'm indifferent, but like an adamant like anti-theist, like not a believer in God, like didn't understand it, didn't think it made sense, thought it was sort of foolishness. And he was an incredibly sharp guy. In fact, this guy was he was a professor at Cambridge and at Oxford. I mean, this guy was sharp. He was brilliant. And so when he became a Christian, one of the things that he realized he was probably going to have to start doing is go to church. And he didn't want to do that because, and I hate this so much because I love C.S. Lewis with my whole heart. I can't wait to see him and hug him until it gets uncomfortable. I love him so much. But C.S. Lewis was a snob. He was kind of like conceited. He thought he was better than other people. And church was a place full of like people from all different classes and different education backgrounds. And in fact, he writes about this in his autobiography, Surprised by Joy. I think this is funny. He says, I disliked very much their hymns, which I consider to be fifth-rate poems set to sixth-rate music. But as I went on, I saw the great merit of it. I came up against different people of quite different outlooks and different education, and then gradually my conceit began peeling off. I realized that the hymns, which were still sixth-rate music, were nevertheless being sung with devotion and benefit by an old saint in elastic side boots in the opposite pew. And then you realize that you aren't fit to clean those boots. It gets you out of your solitary conceit. God has designed the church to be a place that changes us, that forms us. By rubbing up against one another, we become more like Jesus. We become better versions of ourselves. We become holier people. We say here at Prairie Heights all the time, the church is not a building. It's not. I heard Doug say it last week. Church is not a building, it's a people. But something happens when the people come together that's really special, that's worth prioritizing, that's worth choosing, that's worth making something that is a regular part of my life. This is why the writer of Hebrews has to say, this is a huge deal. Don't give this up. Keep coming. So in closing today, what I want to do is just get really practical about how to come to church. And I know you're like, we made it. We're here. We're good. Let's close early and go get lunch. Okay, I want to give a couple of like ideas about how you can be more intentional in how we come to church. So first, I want to talk about how to prepare to come to church. And I'm not talking about getting dressed. I'm talking about like the decision, the intention, the decision to go to church. A lot of us can be tempted to kind of put off those sorts of decisions until Sunday morning. Whenever we put off decisions like that, the likelihood of us saying, like rolling over on Sunday morning and going, you know what, it's fine. It's pretty high. It's pretty high. So one of the first things that we can do is just to decide the day before, I'm going to go to church, and tell someone about it. If you're in a grow group, tell your friend, hey, I'm going to go to the 11, and can we sit together, but not too close to the front? It freaks me out. And then like you just have a person and there's like some accountability in it. It's like when you're like, I want to go to the gym more, but I don't want to go. So I tell my friend who goes like, hey, I'll see you there at 6 a.m. Like it's an accountability thing. It's a way of saying like, I have some skin in the game now. Or invite a friend, bring a neighbor with you. That'll get you here, It's a way of sort of recognizing like, I'm always looking for a good reason to bail out of something. I think I remember John Mulaney said, he's like, pound for pound, there is no quicker hit of dopamine than someone canceling plans. It's just like that, like, oh, thank goodness. Like when time opens up, you just feel like this is an incredible hit, because like I feel so cluttered all the time. And so I'm always kind of looking for ways to get out of things. So just choosing the day before, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. I'm going to bring someone along with me. I'm going to make this a priority. And then as you're coming, like think about why you're here. Prepare yourself. Think about what you want out of it. Talk to God about it. If you have people in the car, kids, neighbors, roommates, family, whatever, what are you looking forward to? What do you hope happens here? This is all that like vision stuff. Like, why am I doing this? Why is this a priority? Why do I want this? We tend to do that for certain meetings. Like, we have lots of meetings throughout our life that you probably don't think about for more than 5 seconds before you walk into it. But there's some meetings that a little bit of thought goes into it. Like maybe it's like an annual physical, or it's like a meeting with lawyers about a foster situation, or whatever it is. Like there are some things that we're like, okay, I'm going to be prepared for this. And all I'm saying is like, this is a really big deal what happens in here. This is really special. Like how do I make sure that I'm like taking a minute in the car in the parking lot, take a beat, and just what do I hope happens here, God? Then arrive. What happens when we walk in the door? Well, the writer of Hebrews reminds us, like, let us consider how to spur one another on towards love and good deeds, encouraging one another. And I think when we arrive, that's when we, especially if this is your place, like this isn't, if you're visiting, if you're still checking this out, if you haven't been coming here for very long, if you're not sure where you are with God, all those questions, I just want to say this next part's not for you. You are our guest. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for coming to church. It's an incredibly scary thing to come to church. There's lots of reasons not to come. Sometimes it's triggering, all sorts of stuff. So we just want you to receive. Come, we'll help take care of your kids. We'll figure out, we'll get you coffee. Like, you are a guest. Stop at Connect, get a gift. You're a guest. But if this is your place and you've been coming here for a while, then it's like when you show up here, you are essentially hosting people in your home. This is your place. You know the way around. You know how things work. You get to be the warm smile. You get to be the encouraging, hospitable person who helps the person who you can tell is wandering around and doesn't know what to do. Like, you get to be that. You get to consider how you can encourage and engage a person and make a huge difference perhaps in a person's life by simply being kind to them or saying, would you like to sit with me? I don't know if you are sitting with anyone, but if not, you can sit with me. Or maybe even like, you want to go get lunch afterwards. I know that's super scary, but like ways of making a person like feel welcome, like a part of this thing. Now, before we talk about the last way that we come to church, I want to talk about online church for a minute. So online church, probably some of you are thinking about it in here. Probably many of you are thinking about it who are watching at home. Online church is such a huge gift. Such a huge gift. You know, I mean, think about it. For most of history, if you were homebound, if you were sick, if you were traveling, you had no way of staying connected to your church community. You just were like, I'll be back if I come back, when I come back. And now, most churches, especially since 2020, have some way of people who are not in the room to feel like they're still a part of the room. And if you're one of the people who's watching at home who has reasons like that why you can't be here, you're taking care of a sick parent, or you have some sort of complication that, you know, you're immunocompromised and you can't go out in public, whatever it is, if there's reasons why you need that, then we're so glad to be able to offer this gift. And we're going to do everything we can to make it the best home experience as possible. And I know that while you're at home, it's possible to engage. It's possible, I mean, you could be taking notes right now. You can be standing and singing with the band. I also know personally what it's like to be going to online church while I'm emptying the dishwasher. Has anyone ever done that? That's a really holy experience. You really feel the presence of God. You're trying to cram all the dishes away. Like, so it's possible to be at home going to church and actually be completely disengaged. And so I just want to say, like, as a gentle, like, nudge, since 2020, a bunch of us have gotten a little lazy. Like, we've found ways to do the easier thing for lots of good reasons. You know, it makes sense. If you have the freedom and the availability and the ability to come to church. We are embodied creatures. Something happens when we're here. Our hearts tend to follow the direction that our bodies are taking us, which we're going to talk about again in a moment. And so I just want to, like, with all gentleness and humility, just encourage you, like, and just to be clear, it's possible to be here and be totally unengaged and be home and be totally engaged. So, I mean, that's still a decision that we have to make. But if you can be here, something happens. Something that only happens when we're all in here together. Finally, the third way that we come to church is we choose to engage. I want to talk first about worship. How do we engage in worship? We're in all different places in here with God. There are people in here who are still trying to figure out if you buy into any of this. There are people who've been walking with God for years. There are people who are brand new baby Christians and they're still trying to figure out all this stuff, and there's all these words and they don't make any sense, and like, why do we always sing about walls falling down and what's a Jericho and like all that stuff. So like wherever you are on that spectrum, there's a way for you to engage in what happens here on Sunday morning with the music. So first of all, if you wouldn't call yourself a Christian, and you know the words don't make a lot of sense and you don't really want to sing them, I just want to encourage you to think about the music. Like, just pay attention to the music and how beautiful it can be. Pay attention to a beautiful singing voice. And why do I say that? Because all beauty emanates out of the overflow of God's creative goodness. And all beauty can be a pathway that eventually finds our way to God. So just being open and being like, that is a really beautiful harmony. That was a really cool, I really like that bridge. Whatever it is. Maybe you're not musical and you're like, I don't know what those words mean. That's okay. You can just think that sounded nice, you know? that can be a way for you to engage. If you are a new Christian and you're still trying to figure out what all these things mean, it's okay to be confused by these things. It's okay to feel like maybe there's like a inside baseball talk that I'm just not privy to yet. You can write those things down, ask questions, come up to one of your pastors. We'd love to talk about it. Find ways to just engage with your mind with the words and the concepts. Like choose to put your coffee down for a second and just try to think deeply about what this is. And if you're a Christian here who's been walking with God for years, but you're wanting to grow in this, like let me encourage you to do something that's going to feel totally terrifying to what I have discovered is a pretty pervasive North Dakotan stoicism. Use your body a little bit in worship. Maybe just, like I said, like put coffee down and uncross your arms or put your hands out like this. I know this sounds silly. Put a hand on your heart. These are all things that I do. Now I'm like, let's go, here we are. But I mean, I wasn't that way. I didn't grow up that way. That's not my background. I was really uncomfortable, especially because I'm so tall and I always felt like, oh man, I'm just blocking like 8 rows behind me. These poor people, they're never gonna see these lyrics. So I was always like very self-conscious about that. And then one day I was in a worship service with one of my friends who's a worship pastor at this church in Atlanta. And he said, hey, for this next song, I wanna encourage you to do something. I wanna encourage you to put a hand in the air. And he's like, and here's why. It's not because I want you to do this. And it's not because God needs you to do this. He said, it's because your soul needs you to do this. Because your heart follows the pathways of your body. You're made that way. God has made you an integrated whole. So if you want to challenge yourself a little bit, try to engage your body a little bit in worship. See what happens. See if it opens up your heart a little bit. Okay, worship. Second, learn. This is what we're doing right now. How do we learn? Come to church imagining that what you are hearing is on purpose. And I don't mean like because I wrote it down. I mean like God has something to say to you. That the things that are happening in here are not accidents. Somehow in God's crazy scheme of like managing the universe, he has you here to hear a certain thing from him on purpose today. Some of you may know the name Dietrich Bonhoeffer. There's a really famous book about him a number of years ago. He's a Christian martyr. He died at the hands of the Nazis. But he started a seminary, and one of the things that he taught his students, like as a most foundational lesson, was every time you open the scriptures, imagine that that is God's personal word to you today. Like wherever you find yourself, that there's an intention in God there. I was talking to someone in the lobby last week, and she was sharing with me after the sermon that it cleared something up that she'd been wrestling with all week long. She's like, I had this question, I didn't know what this meant, and I'd read this thing, and I think it was Isaiah, and I didn't see how it fit, and then you said this thing, and it was like, I suddenly got it. Now that is so cool, and it's not because I had anything to do with it. It's because God, that's what God is like. God has something to say to you. So as we learn, we're just attentive. We're just like, what are the things that are standing out to me? Maybe I'm making a quick note on my phone. Like, oh, like I want to go back to this. Or maybe like I'll do this. Create a calendar block for like Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. with this thought like, oh, Matthew said this. I want to think about this while I'm cooking dinner. Whatever it is. Just some like way of like working the stuff into the fabric of my life so it's becoming a habit where I'm choosing to engage with it throughout the week. And then finally, the third way that we engage here is by serving. And you know there's lots of ways to serve here. This church only happens because so many of you already do this. You serve on the band and in tech and in hospitality and parking and coffee and on and on and on and on. If you don't serve here yet, but this is your place, you've been coming here a while, this is how you take that next step towards ownership. This is how this becomes your place. This is how you become a person who's like, this is my home. I'm having people to my home. I'm welcoming them in. If you want to do that, there's so many opportunities. Kids, Oxygen, our youth program. Go to the Connect counter. We'd love to help you. Because this is how we get from becoming people who merely come to receive to becoming people who come to receive and to give. Here's what we're gonna do in closing. We're gonna actually, the band's gonna come up in a second. We're gonna sing another song together, almost as a way of like practicing what we just talked about. You're like, I don't wanna do this. I know, but we're gonna do it together because what we need to do is we need to like work this stuff into our hearts. And one of the things that Christian mystics have said about church forever, well, they've actually said this about a number of places in the world. And I know if you're like, what's a Christian mystic? Is that a Christian? It is. It's just one that's a bit more mystical. A Christian mystic, they love to talk about thin places. It's one of my favorite things in the world. If I could ever figure out how to, reflect it on a tattoo, I would get one. Thin places are those places where like heaven and earth seem to interlock, where there's this sense that like God is right here. He's just on the other side of this breath. Church is a thin place. It's designed that way. It's made that way. You and I are given this incredible gift of God building a home for us and filling it with our family and giving us a way every single week to be reminded of what is most essential and necessary in my life so that we can do it with one another. So let's pray, and then we'll sing together. Jesus, we do want for our life what you want for our life, because we know that you really do want what's best, that you love us, God. We sang this, that you are madly in love with us, that your intentions towards us are good. So as we think really practical about our life and the nuts and bolts and how things show up on calendars and alarm clocks and all these things, we just ask for an openness and an excitement to walk in your ways and to become more like you as we grow closer to you. And we pray, Lord, that you would help us in whatever way we can today, wherever we are on the road, to just in a small way in our heart say yes to you right now. And maybe saying yes for the very first time. Like I've never really even said yes to God, but I want to say, I'll follow you. I want what you want. I say yes. And so, Jesus, we ask that as we sing these words, that we would be reminded of this incredibly good and timeless truth, that you will never stop doing good for us. You're making us new. And so we, Lord, can be people who praise you with our whole lives. Help us to celebrate what a good God you are. And we ask these things in Christ's name. Amen.